Hello everyone, I'm Hillary with Dominion Tea, and today we're going to talk about the shelf life of tea and how to store your tea properly. So, shelf life of tea, how long is tea good for? You're going to be amazed. So anywhere between 5 to 10 years. So you got a long shelf life, but there's a big caveat to that. It depends on the type of tea, and it depends on how you store it. So storing your tea correctly gives you a very long life. To give you kind of a nice example of this, when they were digging out the terracotta warriors in China, they found a clay pot full of tea. And the tea was so well preserved that they were actually able to run it for DNA sampling 500 plus years later, and successfully map the DNA of the tea leaves that were inside the tomb with the terracotta warriors. So good storage is key. Let's talk about your different types of tea. So white tea. You can store white tea for 3 to 5 years, but guess what? By the time you get there, it's actually technically going to be green tea. Now, you may not notice because you haven't drunk it enough to realize that your taste has changed on this. So it's going to be a little bit darker, heavier as it gets older. Ideally, you're going to drink your white tea in 12 months to keep the freshness and to keep the white tea characteristic. But at the same time, if you store it correctly, it can go longer. Keep in mind there are aged white teas pressed into cakes that you can age easily if you want to wait that long, 10 to 15 years. But you can definitely enjoy them sooner. Your green teas, same rule as the white. You want to drink them fresh, especially if you're dealing in the world of matcha or shincha, so your Japanese greens. So you want to get those in a 12-month time period. They will start to oxidize. Now they're going to oxidize into the oolong range, but they're not going to be creamy like an oolong. What's going to happen is that grassiness is going to turn into woodiness as you get older. So what do you want to do with your green teas? You definitely we'll get to storage and keeping them out of air. In some cases, if you are good about resealing a package like this, you can store them in the hydrator drawer of your refrigerator. But you got to keep the moisture out of them, and you've got to keep that package sealed. And so that's an option in elongating your storage capability on something like matcha, which will definitely, as soon as you kind of open it up to the air, will start to oxidize and age faster than the other teas. Your oolongs, well, oolongs are a lot of fun. They actually have a really long shelf life. So you can go out 10, sometimes 15 years. Again, this is another tea that's being aged. And of course, your blacks, easy 5 years, if not 10. Keep in mind, if you're wondering, well, if I get out to that 10-year mark, how do I know if my black tea is bad? If your black tea starts to taste like burnt toast, it's aged. Your tea may also take on the flavor of paper, especially if it's stored in a paper tea bag. Once it starts to take on that paper flavor, you've hit the point where don't throw out your tea, okay? What you do instead, especially when you've got these tea bags, is all you're gonna do is cut out that metal staple at the top and put the rest of it in compost. So put it at the base of your plants, put it in your compost pile if you have it, go outside, put it underneath your azaleas. You may not like the taste of it. The plants don't care what it tastes like, but they can at least get the nutrients out of it, and you're not adding to the landfill. So what do you store in to guarantee life? I am going to say this does not cover pu'er. That's an entirely different monster because it's fermented tea, and they are stored totally differently. So this covers all your other tea types. So what do you store? You need to be aware of the enemy of tea when you have to pick your storage containers. So sunlight is one of them. So direct light. You pick a container that is glass, that has a seal on the top of it. Do not put this out where there is light. Put it in a cabinet with a door or put it in a pantry that does not have direct light. If you're in glass and indirect light, you will absolutely kill your tea, and it will not take much time. We're talking months. So choose carefully. So sunlight's one enemy. Your next enemy is moisture and air in general. So tea is hygroscopic. It's a fun term. It says that's your tendency to absorb moisture out of the air. What does that mean? You need a sealed top and as much air out of the package as possible. It's part of the reason why we sell our tea in these bags. The Ziploc seal, and of course we seal at the top as well, helps to keep the air out. Now, yes, absolutely, these Ziplocs sometimes come apart. There's a trick though to help you elongate the life of these Ziplocs. is when you're in there trying to open your tea, don't pull from the top. Find the edge of the plastic in there and then pull. That's gonna help keep it glued onto the sides of the bags. These were never meant to be long-term storage devices, but at least in the near term, if you're a fast tea drinker like I am, they'll serve you well if you're careful with the Ziploc. So what do you do if you want a little bit more long-term storage? So let's talk about a canister with a latching lid as another option besides glass for long-term storage. You're gonna wanna watch that inside seal, it does a good job. However, these aren't perfect either because the seams on them are gonna let in air. So you do need to be aware that periodically you're gonna wanna wipe this out. Now let's talk material for a second because that makes a big difference. We talked about hygroscopic and tea. Plastic is an option in some cases, and I'll get back to why my tea bags are in there. But if you're doing a high-end loose tea, you don't want plastic, you want metal or glass because you're going to want to make sure you can remove all the flavor or any remaining scent of that tea before you refresh it. So keep that in mind when you're looking at storage containers. So let's talk about plastic as a storage container. So we're all guilty, right? You go on vacation or you break down, you get that box of tea bags. Guess what? That box, because it is paper, lets in a lot of air. And so it's gonna age your tea bags. You don't wanna hear that your tea bags are only supposed to have a shelf life of about 6 months, especially when you're buying a box of tea bags that could probably last you a year. So if you've got them, get them out of that paper box. You can absolutely go into a plastic container as long as you're out of sunlight again. Just keep in mind that plastic container is gonna absorb in some of that scent from the tea. So when we're talking about tea bags, right? These are loose tea bags inside of a paper box. What do you do when your tea bag's got a wrapper? Well, you need to know what that wrapper is made out of. So our wrapper is a metallic wrapper that holds in air on our tea bags. This actually gives you a 10-year shelf life on that tea bag, which is amazing. Your paper wrappers do not. So if your tea bag is in a paper wrapper, you've maybe got a year on it. So you're gonna wanna, if you take it out and you brew it and your tea tastes like paper, it's time to send those to compost as well. And those paper outside wrappers can also go into your compost pile. So generally speaking, at least with your tea bags, know your material. And by the way, when you know your material, your pyramid bags, not all are created equal. This is ours. So I know you can absolutely compost this bag. Other ones may not be made of material that is compostable. So you're gonna wanna read that outside wrapper first before you go putting them into your compost pile if you decide you need to get rid of them. So now that you know how to store your tea, it's time to go clean out that closet, make room for more. We hope you enjoyed learning more about tea with us. Hit the subscribe button so that you can be notified when we add more videos to our channel. And check out the highlighted videos to learn even more about tea. And last but not least, you can check out all of the teas we talk about in our videos at dominiontea.com.